Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of her kitchen island, a glass of Pinot Grigio in one hand and a pencil in the other, sketching absent-mindedly on the corner of her daughter's math homework. The modern suburban home around her hummed with the quiet rhythm of a Tuesday evening. The dishwasher whirring softly, the faint sound of Ava's cartoon drifting from the living room, and Lena's pencil scratching out fractions beside her. At 38, Clara had built a life that felt like a well-designed blueprint: clean lines, sturdy foundations, a balance of beauty and function. Her boutique interior design firm, co-founded with her husband Ryan and their friend Julian, had just landed a feature in Architectural Digest. Financially comfortable, two bright girls, Lena 9 and Ava 6, and a marriage that seemed, at least on the surface, to hold steady after 12 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She glanced at the clock, 7:42 p.m. Ryan had texted earlier. "Working late again, don't wait up." And though the message was routine, it landed heavier tonight. Maybe it was the chill creeping through the window pane, or the way the house felt too still without his presence. Clara set her wine down and reached for the family iPad on the counter, intending to pull up Lena's multiplication tables. The screen flickered on, and there it was. A notification bubble, stark against the pastel wallpaper of their daughter's smiling faces. "Julian Banks, missed you already. You wore that suit just for me, didn't you?" Clara froze. Her thumb hovered over the screen, the words searing into her vision like a typo in a contract she couldn't unsee. Julian, her business partner of 8 years, the charismatic designer who'd charmed clients and coaxed her sketches into reality. Julian, who'd been at their table for Sunday dinners, who'd carried Ava on his shoulders during their last family trip to the coast. And Ryan, her Ryan, the man she'd built a business and a home with, who still kissed her forehead every morning before coffee. The message pulsed there, casual and intimate, as if it belonged to someone else's life. She swiped it away, her breath shallow, and turned to Lena. "Sweetie, let's finish this problem together, okay?" Her voice came out steady, a practiced calm she'd honed from years of soothing clients through missed deadlines. Lena nodded, oblivious, her small brow furrowed over a division sign. Clara's hand trembled as she guided the pencil, her mind racing in jagged loops. It could be a joke, a misunderstanding. Julian was flirty with everyone. His charm was half the reason their firm thrived. But that suit, Ryan had worn it yesterday, a sharp navy number she'd picked out for him, saying it brought out his eyes. He grinned at her in the mirror, said, "Anything for you, babe?" Hadn't he? The cartoon in the next room hit a loud crescendo, Ava giggling at some slapstick moment. Clara forced a smile for Lena, who proudly circled her answer. "Perfect, kiddo. You're a natural." She slid the homework aside and picked up the iPad again, her thumb hesitating over the Messages app. She didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she set it face down and poured another inch of wine, the glass cold against her palm. Upstairs, the girls brushed their teeth and climbed into bed, Clara tucking them in with the same bedtime story about a brave fox and a clever rabbit. She kissed their foreheads, lingering a moment longer than usual, grounding herself in their warmth. Back downstairs, the house settled into silence, the kind that pressed against her ears. Ryan wouldn't be home for hours, if at all. She sat on the couch, the iPad glowing accusingly from the coffee table. Clara was no stranger to intuition. She'd built her career on it, sensing when a client needed bold colors or quiet neutrals, when a space begged for light or shadow. But this was a crack in the foundation she hadn't seen coming. She reached for the device, her reflection staring back from the dark screen, a woman with tired green eyes, chestnut hair slipping from its loose bun, a face that still held a quiet strength. She unlocked it, the message still there, unchanged, unapologetic. Her world didn't shatter, not yet. It tilted, slow and deliberate, like a building shifting off its axis. Clara took a breath, sharp and deliberate, and whispered to the empty room, "What the hell is going on?" Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the king-sized bed she shared with Ryan, the sheets cool and undisturbed on his side, staring at the ceiling as the hours bled into one another. The message from Julian looped in her mind like a broken reel. "Missed you already. You wore that suit just for me, didn't you?" Each word a splinter she couldn't pull out. By 3 a.m., denial had given way to a churning mix of confusion and dread, and she slipped out of bed, barefoot on the hardwood, moving silently past the girls' rooms. Downstairs, she poured a glass of water she didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, the iPad glowing in the dark like a beacon she both craved and feared. She didn't confront Ryan when he stumbled in at 6:17 a.m., smelling faintly of coffee and something sharper, cologne maybe, or whiskey. He muttered a tired, "Hey babe," and kissed her temple before heading upstairs to shower. Clara smiled, a reflex she hated herself for, and said, "Rough night?" He didn't answer, just called back. Client meeting ran long as the bathroom door clicked shut. She waited until the water hissed through the pipes before opening the iPad again. The message was still there, buried now under a few others. Lena's teacher, about a field trip, a reminder from their accountant, but it hadn't vanished like she'd half hoped. She screenshot it, her fingers trembling, and emailed it to herself from a private account Ryan didn't know about. Step 1. For days, Clara played the part she'd perfected, the supportive wife, the attentive mother, the sharp-minded architect. She drove Lena to soccer practice, helped Ava with a diorama of the solar system, and nodded through a client call about custom cabinetry. But beneath the surface, she was a detective in her own life, piecing together a puzzle she didn't want to solve. She started small, checking Ryan's phone when he left it on the counter, unlocked. A habit she once teased him about. Nothing overt, no texts from Julian, just work emails and a fantasy football thread. But there were gaps, hours unaccounted for in his calendar, labeled vaguely as meetings or site visits. She dug deeper. Late at night, after the girls were asleep and Ryan was working again, Clara pulled out old devices from a closet box, an outdated laptop, a cracked iPhone he'd replaced last year. She logged into their shared cloud drive, a digital graveyard of family photos and business files. At first, it was innocent. Ava's first steps, Lena's 5th birthday, a grainy shot of her and Ryan toasting at the firm's launch party. Then, buried in a folder marked Taxes 2022, she found it. A photo of Ryan and Julian in the design studio, shirtless, arms slung around each other, grins wide and unguarded. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., a night Ryan had told her he was finalizing a pitch with a supplier. The studio lights cast long shadows, and a bottle of bourbon sat open on the drafting table. Clara's stomach twisted. She saved the image to a USB drive and kept searching. Patterns emerged. Business trips that overlapped with Julian's schedule. Chicago, Seattle. A weekend in Miami she'd assumed was a solo jaunt. She cross-referenced dates with their firm's project logs, her architect's eye catching discrepancies. No client meetings recorded, no invoices filed. She found emails, too, buried in an archive Ryan must have thought she'd never check. One from Julian, 6 months ago. Can't wait to get you alone again. Sees none the wiser. Another, more recent. We're almost there, just keep her busy. Clara's breath caught, her hands clenching the laptop so hard the keys creaked. This wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. She replayed memories like a film reel, searching for cracks she'd missed. Julian at their dining table, pouring wine with that easy laugh, his hand brushing Ryan's as he passed the bottle. Family vacations, Julian tagging along, insisting it was team bonding. The way he'd linger by Ryan's side at the pool while Clara chased the girls through the waves. Subtle glances she'd chalked up to camaraderie, late-night strategy sessions she'd trusted without question. How had she been so blind? By the 5th night, Clara sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by printed screenshots, a timeline scrawled on a legal pad. The photo from the studio stared up at her, Ryan's familiar jawline and Julian's sharp cheekbones, framed in a moment she'd never been part of. Her chest ached. Not just from betrayal, but from the dawning realization that this wasn't a fling. It was a long con, and she was the mark. She pressed her palms to her eyes, willing the tears back, and whispered to the empty house. What else don't I know? Clara's kitchen table became her war room. By daylight, it held cereal bowls and Ava's glitter-strewn art projects. By night, it was a sprawl of evidence, screenshots, timelines, and a growing stack of questions she couldn't yet answer. She'd stopped sleeping properly, her mind a treadmill of what-ifs and how-could-Is, but she kept her face composed for the girls. Lena noticed her quietness once, asking over breakfast, "Mom, you okay? You look like you're thinking hard." Clara forced a smile, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Just designing something big in my head, sweetie. Eat your toast." Inside, she was crumbling, but she wouldn't let it show. Not yet. She needed clarity, not just emotionally, but legally, so she called Naomi Pierce, an old college friend turned attorney who'd always had a knack for cutting through bullshit. They met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, far from the firm's sleek downtown orbit. Naomi, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense in a tailored blazer, slid into the booth across from Clara and didn't waste time. "Spill it. You look like hell." Clara hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. Copies of the studio photo, the cryptic emails, the message from Julian. Naomi's brow furrowed as she slipped through, her silence heavier than any words. Finally, she looked up. "You think this is just an affair?" Clara shook her head, voice low. "I think it's more." Naomi promised discretion and took the folder, saying she'd dig into corporate records. 2 days later, she called Clara to her office after hours. The news hit like a sledgehammer. "Your firm's ownership docs? Revised 3 months ago. You're not listed as a co-owner anymore, just Ryan and Julian. Same with the house title. Your name's Bonk. She gripped the edge of Naomi's desk, the room tilting. That's impossible. I signed those papers with Ryan years ago. We built this together. Naomi's jaw tightened. Someone forged your signature on the amendments. It's sloppy, but it's done. And there's more? Your joint business account? Drained. Over $400,000 moved to an offshore account in the Caymans. I'm tracing it, but it's not looking good. Clara's mind flashed back to the day she and Ryan signed the original paperwork, 8 years ago. They'd been in a cramped notary's office, paint swatches and fabric samples spilling from her bag, Ryan's hand warm on her back as they laughed about their empire. She'd designed their logo that night, Whitmore Banks, her steady lines paired with Julian's flair. Now, that memory felt like a ghost overridden by betrayal. How could he do this? She whispered, more to herself than Naomi. The attorney leaned forward, voice firm. He didn't do it alone. Julian's fingerprints are all over this, literally and figuratively. We'll fight it, Clara, but you need to brace yourself. That night, alone in her home office, Clara pulled up their online banking. The business account, once a healthy nest egg for expansion, sat at a mocking $12.34. She traced the transfers, huge sums siphoned off over months, masked as consulting fees or vendor payments. Her personal savings were untouched, but that was cold comfort. She'd poured everything into the firm, her designs, her vision, her trust, and they'd stripped it away piece by piece. She couldn't face Ryan yet. The thought of his easy grin, the way he'd hume while cooking pancakes for the girls, made her sick. Not with anger, but with loss. Instead, she booked an emergency session with her therapist, Dr. Ellis, a soft-spoken woman who'd helped her through postpartum anxiety years ago. In the dim office, surrounded by ferns and a ticking clock, Clara let it spill. I feel like I'm disappearing, she said, voice cracking. Not just from him, but from everything we built. They're rewriting me out of my own life. Dr. Ellis leaned forward, her calm anchoring. You're not disappearing, Clara. You're waking up. What do you want to do about it? Clara stared at her hands, the faint ink stains from years of sketching, and felt a flicker of something hard beneath the hurt. I want to know why, and I want it back. Driving home, the suburbs blurred past neat lawns, glowing windows, lives that seemed intact. Hers wasn't anymore. She thought of Lena and Ava, asleep in their beds, and the fear sharpened. If Ryan and Julian could erase her from the business, from their home, what stopped them from taking her girls too? She pulled into the garage, the engine ticking as it cooled, and sat there, hands tight on the wheel. The fallout had begun, silent but seismic, and she knew there was no going back. Clara woke the next morning with a clarity that felt like armor. The hurt still gnawed at her, sharp and raw, but she buried it beneath a plan. She couldn't let Ryan or Julian see her crack, not when they'd already taken so much. So she played the part she'd mastered over years of marriage and motherhood. The unflappable wife, the steady hand. At breakfast, she flipped pancakes for the girls, laughing as Ava smeared syrup on her chin, while Ryan shuffled in, bleary-eyed from another late night. Morning, he mumbled, pouring coffee. Clara smiled, tight but warm. Morning. Big day ahead? He shrugged, avoiding her eyes. Just the usual. He nodded, flipping another pancake, and said nothing more. The performance was exhausting, but it bought her time. Ryan didn't suspect a thing. He was too wrapped up in his own evasions, his phone buzzing constantly as he shoveled eggs into his mouth. Clara watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the way he angled the screen away from her, a habit she'd once ignored. Now, it was a tell. After he kissed the girls goodbye and left for the studio, she exhaled, the house settling into a fragile quiet. Lena and Ava ran upstairs to grab their backpacks, and Clara moved fast. She started documenting everything. She printed the emails she'd found, the photo from the studio, the bank statements Naomi had flagged, each page a brick in the wall she was building. She took screenshots of Ryan's calendar from their shared cloud, capturing those vague meetings that lined up with Julian's trips. She backed it all up on a new external drive, stashed in a locked drawer in her office, and password-protected her personal laptop with a code Ryan would never guess, the girls' birth dates. Reverse. Every move was deliberate, her architect's precision turned inward. She needed more, though, something concrete to tie their lies together. On a hunch, she dug out a company tablet they'd used for site surveys, one Ryan had left in a kitchen drawer months ago. It was still linked to their shared GPS app, a tool they'd once used to coordinate client visits. She opened it, and there it was. Julian's location, a blinking dot at a downtown hotel, time-stamped from last night when Ryan had worked late. Clara's pulse quickened. She tracked back through the history, restaurants, bars, a rental cabin 2 hours north, all places Ryan had never mentioned. She photographed the screen with her phone, her hand steady despite the tremor in her chest. That afternoon, while the girls were at school, Clara drove to the studio alone. The space felt foreign now, her sketches framed on the walls, the sleek furniture she'd sourced, all tainted by what she knew. She locked the door behind her and moved to Julian's desk, a minimalist slab of oak he'd always kept pristine. She rifled through drawers, pens, contracts, a half-empty pack of gum, until she found a hidden compartment beneath a false bottom. Inside was a stash of receipts, hotel bookings under Julian's name, a $3,000 watch from a jeweler she didn't recognize, handwritten notes in Ryan's scroll. Friday, 8 p.m. Don't be late. She spread them out, snapping photos, her breath shallow. This wasn't just infidelity, it was a paper trail of their arrogance. Clara needed perspective, so she reached out to former employees. Quietly, through personal emails, not the firm's system. She started with Tara, a junior designer who'd left abruptly last year after a cryptic argument with Julian. They met at a park, Tara's toddler playing in the sand as they talked. He changed, Tara said, voice low. Ryan, I mean. After those trips with Julian, he got cold distant. Julian was always manipulative, but Ryan? He just followed. I quit when they started silencing me on projects I'd pitched. Clara nodded, her suspicions hardening. Did they ever mention me? Tara hesitated, then said, once. Julian laughed about how you'd never see it coming. I thought he meant a surprise party or something. God, Clara, I'm sorry. Back home, Clara sat in her office, the receipts and Tara's words swirling in her mind. She acted normal that evening, cooked spaghetti, helped Lena with spelling words, tucked Ava in with a lullaby. Ryan came home late again, claiming a client dinner, and collapsed on the couch with a beer. Clara kissed his forehead, tasting the lie on her lips, and said, You work too hard. He grunted, eyes on his phone. She retreated to her office, locking the door, and stared at the evidence piling up. She wasn't just gathering proof now. She was arming herself. They thought she was blind, pliable, a footnote they could erase. But Clara Whitmore wasn't going down without a fight. Clara spent the next week orchestrating her counterstrike with the precision of a blueprint coming to life. Every line had to be exact, every angle calculated. She'd only get one shot at this. She couldn't confront Ryan and Julian in the chaos of home or the unpredictability of a public space. It had to be the studio, their shared ground, where the betrayal had festered. She crafted the bait, a text to both, casual but firm. Dinner meeting at the studio, Thursday, 7 p.m. New project pitch, big client, need us all there. Ryan replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Julian sent a breezy, wouldn't miss it, see. She stared at their responses, her stomach twisting, then locked her phone and got to work. She called Naomi first. I'm doing it, she said, voice steady. Thursday night, can you be there? Naomi didn't hesitate. I'll bring the paperwork and a witness. You sure you're ready? Clara exhaled. I have to be. Naomi arranged for a private investigator, a wiry man named Paul with a knack for discreet audio setups, to join her. They'd station themselves in the studio's adjacent storage room, a space Clara had once used for fabric samples, now a silent ally. Paul would record everything, legally, Naomi assured her, thanks to state consent laws and Clara's ownership stake, however contested. The evidence was her weapon. She compiled it into a sleek black binder, the forged contracts, stripping her name, the offshore account transfers, the studio photo, the GPS logs, the receipts, Tara's testimony scribbled in her own hand. She added printouts of Julian's emails. AC's none the wiser, and Ryan's vague calendar entries, each page a nail in the coffin they'd built for her. Naomi reviewed it, nodding grimly. This is airtight. They'll squirm, but they can't deny it. Clara clutched the binder to her chest, its weight grounding her. Good. I want them to feel it. Thursday morning, she dressed with intention. She chose the navy blazer and cream blouse she'd worn the day they opened the firm, slightly snug now, but a symbol of who she'd been before they tried to erase her. She paired it with heels that clicked with authority, her hair swept into a low bun, her makeup sharp but understated. In the mirror, she didn't see the exhausted wife or the betrayed partner. She saw Clara Whitmore. She dropped the girls at a friend's for a sleepover, promising pizza and a movie night soon, and drove to the studio early. The space was quiet when she arrived, the late afternoon sun slanting through the tall windows. She set the stage, a bottle of wine on the drafting table, 3 glasses, a fake project proposal, sketches she'd pulled from an old file, meaningless but convincing. She hid the binder under a stack of design magazines, its black spine just visible if you knew where to look. Naomi and Paul slipped in through the back entrance, settling into the storage room with a recorder and a laptop. Paul tested the mic clipped to Clara's blazer, a tiny thing hidden in the lapel. Clear as day, he whispered through her earpiece. Naomi squeezed her arm. You've got this. We're right here. They shut the door, and Clara was alone again, the silence thick with anticipation. She paced the studio, her heels echoing on the polished concrete. Memories flickered. Her first sketch on that table, Ryan's laugh as they spilled paint on the floor, Julian's toast when they landed their first client. It had been theirs, once. Now, it was a battlefield. She stopped at the window, watching the street below as dusk settled, headlights flickering to life. Her phone buzzed. She typed back, "No rush. See you soon." Her heart thudded, but her hands were steady as she poured herself a glass of wine she wouldn't drink. It was a prop, like the proposal, like the smile she'd wear when they walked in. At 7:08 the door swung open, and there they were, Ryan in his navy suit, that suit, she noted with a bitter twist, and Julian in a tailored jacket, his grin as effortless as ever. "Clara," Julian said, striding in. "You're pulling out all the stops tonight, huh?" Ryan followed, loosening his tie, his eyes flicking to her outfit with a faint frown. "Been a while since I've seen that blazer," he said, almost soft like he remembered. Clara smiled, her voice smooth as glass. "Thought it was fitting, shall we?" She gestured to the table and they sat, the air between them humming with a tension they didn't yet understand. She took a breath, her mic picking up the faint rustle of her blouse, and began. Clara let the moment settle, the studio's overhead lights casting stark shadows across the drafting table. Ryan leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine she'd poured him, while Julian perched on the edge of his seat, all charm and restless energy. She opened the fake proposal, sliding it toward them with a practiced ease. "So," she began, her voice bright but edged. "This client's looking for a full residential overhaul, modern, sustainable, high budget. I've roughed out some concepts." She pointed to the sketches, watching their faces as they nodded along, Ryan distracted, Julian feigning interest. She let them relax, let the wine loosen their guards before she shifted the tide. "Before we dive in," she said, leaning forward, "I wanted to talk about the firm's future. We've been a trio for a long time, 8 years, right?" Ryan glanced up, mid-sip, his brow creasing slightly. Julian flashed a grin. "Feels longer, doesn't it? Best decision we ever made." Clara tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "I thought so too, but lately, I've been wondering where I fit in." She paused, letting the words hang. "Maybe you can clarify something for me." She slid the binder out, its black cover thudding softly against the table. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Julian's grin faltered. Clara opened it, flipping to the first page, the revised ownership contract, her name conspicuously absent. "This," she said, tapping the paper, "says I'm not a co-owner anymore. Funny, since I don't recall signing that away." "Clara, what is this?" She didn't flinch. "It's a question, Ryan. Why don't you answer it?" Julian cut in, his tone smooth but strained. "Look, see, there's been some restructuring, legal stuff, boring details. We didn't want to bother you with it." Clara raised an eyebrow, turning the page to the offshore account transfers. $400,000 siphoned away. "Boring details like this? Hundreds of thousands gone, and my name scrubbed from the house title, too. That's a hell of a restructure." Ryan's face reddened, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing it out of proportion. It's just paperwork, babe." "Babe," she echoed, sharp enough to cut. She flipped to the studio photo, sliding it across the table. Ryan shirtless, Julian's arm around him, the bourbon bottle glinting in the background. "Paperwork doesn't explain this. Or this." She pulled out the GPS logs, hotel receipts, the email from Julian. Stared at the photo, his jaw working silently, while Julian laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "Clara, come on. You're making something out of nothing. We're friends. Partners?" "Partners," she interrupted, her voice steel. "Partners don't forge my signature. They don't drain our accounts and plot behind my back." She leaned in, eyes locked on Julian. "You suggested I take a creative advisor role once, didn't you? Less responsibility, you said. Was that the plan all along, to push me out?" Julian's charm cracked, his face twisting. "You're delusional, a failed wife, a failed partner, clinging to this like it's some grand—" The word stung, but Clara didn't waver. She turned to the final page, a contract clause highlighted in yellow, a whistleblower provision Julian had overlooked, granting her veto power over major decisions. Failed? Maybe, but not blind. "This says I still have a say, and I'm using it now." She closed the binder, her hand steady. "You thought I'd never see it coming. You were wrong." Ryan lunged forward, voice hoarse. "Clara, stop this. We can talk it out, just us, no need for—" He froze as the storage room door creaked open. Naomi stepped out, her blazer crisp, Paul behind her with a recorder in hand. "It's all on tape," Naomi said, calm and cold. "Legally obtained, fully admissible. You might want to sit back down, Ryan." Julian shot to his feet, chair scraping. "You're recording us? This is entrapment." "Oh," Naomi smirked. "It's a business meeting. Clara's still a stakeholder. Check your own claws. Sit or don't. It's your funeral. The air thickened, electric with panic. Ryan slumped, hands in his hair, muttering, "This wasn't supposed to happen." Julian rounded on him, furious. "Shut up, Ryan. She's bluffing. She's got nothing." Clara stood, her heels clicking as she crossed to the window, her back to them. "I've got everything," she said, turning to face them. "And you've got a choice. Walk away quietly or I take this to court. Photos, forgery, theft, all of it. You're called." Julian grabbed his jacket, snarling, "You'll hear from our lawyers." Ryan lingered, eyes pleading, but Clara's gaze was ice. "Go," she said, and he did, following Julian out into the night. The door slammed, the sound echoing in the empty studio. Naomi touched her shoulder. "You okay?" Clara nodded, exhaling a breath she'd held too long. "Yeah, I am now." Paul packed up the recorder, grinning. "That was a hell of a show." Clara smiled faintly, the weight lifting, if only slightly. They'd tried to break her, but she'd drawn the line. And held it. The days after the showdown blurred into a haze of quiet upheaval. Clara took a week off, her first real break in years, telling the girls it was a family reset. She didn't mention Ryan, who'd texted once, "We need to talk," before going silent, or Julian, whose absence left an eerie void in their shared world. Instead, she focused on Lena and Ava, driving them to the zoo, baking lopsided cookies, letting them paint her nails in garish pinks and blues. Their laughter stitched her back together, thread by fragile thread, though the night still ached with questions she couldn't answer. She moved them into a temporary apartment, a modest two-bedroom with scuffed floors and a view of a scraggly park. It wasn't the sleek suburban house she'd designed, but it was hers, paid for with the savings Ryan hadn't touched. She unpacked their favorite books and stuffed animals first, turning the small space into a sanctuary. Lena asked once, "Where's Dad?" And Clara knelt, brushing her daughter's hair back. "He's figuring some things out, sweetie. For now, it's us girls." Lena nodded, solemn but trusting, and Ava hugged her leg, oblivious to the weight behind the words. The firm was a wreckage she couldn't face yet, so Clara let Naomi handle the legal fallout, cease and desist letters, asset freezes, a looming audit of the offshore account. She needed to rebuild, not just for herself, but for the life she'd promised her daughters. On a crisp morning, armed with coffee and a sketch pad, she started over. She scrawled Whitmore Studio in bold looping letters, sketching a logo that was hers alone. Clean lines, a single arch, no echoes of Julian's flair or Ryan's shadow. She filed for a new business license that afternoon, her hands trembling as she signed her name, reclaiming it. Word spread fast. Loyal clients, ones she'd wooed with late-night revisions and personal touches, reached out, appalled by the rumors of Ryan and Julian's betrayal. A restaurateur she'd worked with years ago called first. "Clara, you're the heart of that firm. I've got a new spot opening. Design it for me." She took the job, sketching a warm, eclectic space over takeout with the girls giggling beside her. More offers trickled in, each one a lifeline. She hired Tara back, the junior designer who'd left under Julian's thumb, and Tara brought two others, former staff who'd admired Clara's grit. "We're with you," Tara said, unpacking her old drafting tools. "Always were." Clara poured herself into the work, late nights at the apartment's rickety table, her laptop glowing with 3D renderings. But it wasn't enough to rebuild a business. She wanted to leave a mark. She launched a mentoring program for women entrepreneurs, free workshops on design and resilience, held in a borrowed community center. The first session drew a dozen attendees, nervous but eager, and Clara stood before them, her voice "I lost everything once," she said, "but I learned you can build again, better, stronger." They nodded, some teary-eyed, and she felt a spark of purpose beyond revenge. 6 months later, Whitmore Studio landed its first press feature. The headline, "From Betrayal to Blueprint, Clara Whitmore Rebuilds Her Legacy," ran in a local magazine. Alongside a photo of her in the apartment, sketches pinned to the wall, Lena and Ava peeking over her shoulder. The article detailed her split from the firm, carefully worded to avoid libel, and praised her quiet tenacity. Cold poured in, new clients, speaking invites, a woman's business group offering a grant. Clara framed the article, hanging it in the tiny living room, a reminder of what she'd clawed back. Ryan and Julian faded into static. Naomi reported they were tangled in legal quicksand. Lawsuits from creditors, their business licenses revoked after the audit uncovered fraud. Clara didn't gloat. She didn't have the energy. She saw Ryan once, at a custody handoff, his face gaunt, his apologies stuttering. "I messed up, Clara. I never meant—" He nodded, defeated, and she drove away, the girls chattering in the back seat, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Clara rebuilt, not from ruin but Pruitt, brick by brick, sketch by sketch. The apartment grew cluttered with plans and prototypes, the girls' drawings taped beside her own. She wasn't the woman she'd been before, trusting, soft-edged. But she liked this version better. Scarred, yes, but unyielding. One evening, as Ava napped on the couch and Lena read nearby, Clara sat with a glass of wine, sketching a dream house. Not for Ryan, but for them. She smiled, the pencil steady in her hand, and thought, "This is enough." 1 year later, Clara stood in the empty shell of the old studio, the late afternoon sun filtering through dust-streaked windows. The space was a hollow echo of its past, bare walls where her sketches once hung, the drafting table gone, a for-lease sign taped crookedly to the door. She'd driven by on impulse after dropping Lena at soccer practice and Ava at a friend's, drawn to the place where it all unraveled. The air smelled of stale coffee and abandonment. But she didn't feel loss, only a strange, quiet closure. Whitmore and Banks was dead, its licenses revoked, its name tarnished by Ryan and Julian's legal mess. Clara's new firm, Whitmore Studio, thrived a few miles away, in a bright loft she'd leased with her own money, her designs gracing homes and headlines alike. She walked the perimeter, her sneakers soft on the concrete, remembering the night of the showdown, the binder's thud, Julian's snarl, Ryan's faltering excuses. It felt distant now, like a story she'd outgrown. Naomi had kept her updated, the offshore account was seized, the forged contracts voided, and Julian faced fraud charges while Ryan scrambled to settle debts. They'd tried to sue her once, a desperate countersuit, but it collapsed under the weight of her evidence. Clara hadn't attended the hearings, she'd sent Naomi instead, preferring to spend those days with her girls or her clients. Revenge wasn't her fuel, rebirth was. She left the studio and drove to the lake, a spot she and Ryan had scouted years ago, dreaming of a glass-walled house with a dock for summer swims. The dream had faded, but the lake remained, its surface glinting under a soft April sky. Lena and Ava spilled out of the back seat, clutching a potted sapling they'd picked at a nursery. Clara's idea, a small ritual to mark the year. "Here," Lena asked, pointing to a patch of earth near the water. Clara nodded, handing Ava a trowel. "Perfect." They dug together, dirt smudging their hands, the girls giggling as worms wriggled free. The tree went in, roots splayed, and Clara patted the soil down, her fingers lingering on the cool earth. Back at the car, she leaned against the hood, watching Lena chase Ava along the shore, their laughter carrying over the water. The sun dipped low, painting the lake gold, and Clara let herself breathe, really breathe. For the first time in months, she'd lost a marriage, a partnership, a version of herself she'd clung to too long. But she gained something fiercer, a life drawn in her own lines, unshaken by those who'd tried to erase her. The girls ran back, breathless, and piled into the car, chattering about ice cream. Clara smiled, sliding into the driver's seat. "Chocolate or vanilla?" she asked, and their shouts drowned each other out as she pulled onto the road. Later that night, with the girls asleep in their new bedroom, walls now painted a cheerful yellow, Clara sat on the apartment's tiny balcony, a notebook in her lap. She didn't sketch this time, she wrote, her pen moving slow and sure. "They thought I'd break, that I'd fade into the margins of their story. But resilience isn't loud, it's steady, a quiet refusal to disappear. I didn't need to burn their world down. I built my own instead. Clarity came, not in chaos, but in the spaces I carved out after. They tried to erase me, but I drew new lines." She closed the notebook, the city humming softly below, and looked out at the stars pricking the dark. The past was a blueprint she'd outgrown, messy, flawed, but hers to redraw. And as she stood, stepping back into the warm glow of her home, she knew she'd done just that.